Off-site? She looked up from her granola, blinked like she had to replay the question. Oh yeah, long night. Exhausting. We had to rework 2 decks from scratch. I didn't even get to sleep. She laughed a little, sipped her coffee. I crashed in one of the hotel overflow rooms with Erica. Nothing fancy. We were basically working until dawn. She said it so smoothly, like she'd rehearsed it. She didn't look nervous, just tired. Or maybe trying to look tired. There's a difference, and for the first time I realized I wasn't sure which version of her I was looking at. And your shoes? I asked casual. Saw them by the front door this morning. She paused, just a beat too long. Oh yeah, my feet were *ling me, she said, rolling her eyes. You know how my arches get. I took them off in the car. Couldn't deal. She reached for my hand across the table. You okay? You're quiet. I forced a smile. Just tired. Long week. But I was lying. Inside, my mind was already rewinding, sifting through old fragments of behavior I'd ignored. Things that seemed small, but now stood out like red flags waving in slow motion. And the worst part? I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to believe the shoes came off because of sore arches. That the jacket was a borrowed layer from a coworker. That the inside-out blouse was just a bleary-eyed mistake after an all-nighter. That the boutique hotel was a fluke, an accidental booking. That the late-night check-in and pre-dawn checkout were just weird corporate logistics. But none of it added up. There was a quiet I felt that morning. A space between us I hadn't noticed before. The kind that doesn't scream betrayal but hums with it. I didn't say anything else that day, or the next, but something inside me had already shifted. And it wouldn't shift back. They say when something breaks in a relationship, it doesn't always shatter loudly. Sometimes it cracks slowly, quietly, so gradually that you don't even realize it's broken until it's too late. That's how it felt with Grace. After Riverton Lofts, everything shifted in me. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or accuse. I just watched. And when you stop trying to believe someone, you start noticing everything they never wanted you to see. Started with her phone. She used to leave it face up everywhere, on the counter, nightstand, passenger seat. We both did. But over the last few months, it was always flipped over. At first I thought nothing of it, just a habit. But then the notifications disappeared. I realized one night while we were watching a show that the preview banner no longer popped up. The screen would light up, buzz once, then go dark. No name, no message, just silence. Then came the airplane mode. Every Friday around 6 p.m., her phone would go completely dark. I'd ask if she wanted to order in or watch something, and she'd say she was heading to Pilates or meeting a friend for wine. The phone? Just trying to disconnect, she'd say. I get too many emails, right? Except when she'd return, usually late, sometimes after midnight. She looked freshly showered, makeup gone, hair up, not a strand out of place. Her workout clothes were always perfectly clean. No sweat, no wrinkles, like they were more costume than clothing. I'd sniff for detergent, for deodorant, for that post-gym scent I knew so well. Nothing. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, that maybe she had changed gyms or showered before coming home, or maybe the sessions were more relaxed than I thought. But deep down I knew, something about her didn't smell like effort. It smelled like cover-up. And then there were her texts, or rather, the absence of them. We used to have these goofy text threads that ran for days. Random memes, stupid in-jokes, shared photos of our day. It was our thing. But lately, entire days would go by with barely a response. I'd send something funny and get a thumbs-up emoji. Ask a question. Get busy, tutorial. When I asked her if I could send her something on iMessage one day, she handed me her phone and I saw the thread between us had been wiped clean. Just blank. I didn't say anything. I just handed it back. Same thing on her Apple Watch. I noticed it wasn't syncing anymore, not to our shared calendar, not to location. I'd always been able to see if she was at work or in traffic or grabbing coffee downtown. It wasn't invasive. It was just something we both used. But her location was grayed out now. Disabled, it said. When I brought it up, she laughed it off. You really track me like that? she joked. You're such a dad. Maybe. But I noticed. I started tracking other things. Patterns. Habits. Every other week she'd have after-hours work meetings, always near the same intersection, East Park and Ninth. It's the district with the nicer cocktail lounges and boutique salons. The kinds of places people go to not work. I started pulling our bank statements. Yeah. I became that guy. And sure enough, there they were, receipts for cocktails at the Copper Finch, manicures at a salon 2 blocks over, and 2 Uber rides starting at the Riverton Lofts corner on nights she said she was at work. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in the last month. I even looked at social media. Grace wasn't a huge poster, but when she did, she curated things. Bright smiles, cafes, work events, friends. I started noticing something odd. Every photo felt cropped, just slightly. Someone would be partially in frame, a hand on a glass, a shoulder in a mirror, a boot stepping into view. At first glance, it was nothing, but I scrolled back and started seeing it again and again. Then I started noticing the friend's commentary. Underneath her posts, there were repeated comments, little phrases like, "You deserve to feel free," or, "Don't let anyone keep you small." Even her best friend, Talia, posted something like, "So proud of you for taking space and doing you." One even used the word unapologetic. They were subtle, but they weren't for me. It was like they were in on something, like there was an unspoken narrative being built, one I wasn't a part of. And then there was him, Eric, her manager. I didn't think much of him at first. Middle-aged, friendly, too many blazers. He'd been in our house once years ago for a team dinner, brought a bottle of wine and stayed too long. I barely remembered him until his name started popping up everywhere. One morning, I noticed Grace was smiling at her phone before she even got out of bed. The sun was barely up, and I asked what was so funny. She jumped slightly and said it was just Eric being Eric. When I asked what that meant, she said, "He's just intense in the mornings. Sends 6 a.m. pep talks to the whole team." But I started noticing a pattern. She'd get quiet when his name came up. She'd deflect. One night when we were out with friends, someone asked how work was, and Grace started to say something about Eric before correcting herself. "I mean, my boss, you know." She barely said his name out loud after that, as if even naming him gave something away. The worst part? It wasn't just the logistics, the passwords, the receipts, the location data. It was the emotional absence. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She was just elsewhere, like she was already living a second life and I was just the guy who paid the mortgage on the first one. She'd hum songs I didn't recognize, make references I didn't get. One night I asked what she was humming, and she said just something from work, then changed the subject. She wasn't lying in obvious ways anymore. She was editing reality, removing details, sanitizing stories. She would tell me about her day, and every sentence felt pre-cleared, like she was building a narrative, curated, efficient, stripped of texture. And she kept trying to convince me I was imagining things. The worst was one night when I brought up how disconnected I felt. I tried to be honest, vulnerable even. I said I missed how we used to talk, how I missed her. She gave me this tired smile. "We're just busy, babe. It's a season. You've been stressed too. Don't let your mind play tricks on you." She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and went back to replying to emails. I laid there that night, eyes open, thinking to myself, she's gaslighting me. That's what this is. Not directly, not cruelly, but softly, gently, with smiles and routines and convenience. Grace had always been sharp, strategic. If she was doing something, she knew how to cover it. But her mistake was thinking I'd stop looking. I didn't stop. I started writing it all down. Every instance, every charge, every missing hour, every dodged question. I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that didn't leave wiggle room or interpretation. Because as much as I wanted to scream and rage and ask her why, I knew that wouldn't change anything. I'd already seen enough. I just needed someone to see it with me, I never thought I'd hire a private investigator. That always felt like something other people did. Paranoid husbands, movie characters, guys who watch too many courtroom dramas. But there I was, sitting across from a guy named Harris in a small office downtown with a fake ficus and a shelf full of surveillance cameras. He didn't flinch when I explained the situation. In fact, he barely blinked. Just nodded, took notes, asked precise questions. Phone habits, routines, names, addresses. When I mentioned the boutique hotel, he raised an eyebrow. Riverton Lofts? Yeah, that place comes up more often than you'd think. He told me to give him 2 weeks. I gave him everything *TS, receipts, calendar exports, the timeline I'd been building in my notes app like a madman. I half expected him to roll his eyes at how much I'd already tracked. Instead, he just said, "Smart. Makes my job easier." 2 weeks felt like an eternity. I didn't mention a word to Grace. I kept everything surface level, smiles, dinner plans, soft goodnights. I played the part so well I almost convinced myself I was imagining it all. Almost. Then the email came. No subject line. Just a secure PDF link. Password protected. The password was my daughter's middle name. Harris didn't play around. When I opened the file, I stopped breathing. There it was. February 14th, 11:38 p.m. A photo of Grace and Eric, her manager, walking into Riverton Lofts together. Her hair was down, curled slightly at the ends. She wore the same ivory blouse I'd seen buttoned inside out on our security cam. His arm was around her waist. They weren't just close. They were together. 11:42 p.m. Digital room key activated. Room 306. Harris had pulled the metadata from the lock system. 1 room. 2 keys activated on 2 phones. No other occupants registered. 12:17 a.m. A food delivery receipt. 2 entrees, 1 dessert. Delivered directly to room 306. Harris included a screen-captured timestamp from the delivery app. The photo showed the food at the door, 1 burger, 1 kale salad. Grace's favorite. Eric's name was listed on the order. 5:49 a.m. The front door camera of the lofts caught them leaving together. Eric in jeans and a long coat. Grace wearing the same bomber jacket I'd seen her return home in. Her heels in her hand. Her eyes half-lidded. They weren't talking, just moving. Like a couple who didn't need to speak. 6:02 a.m. Uber record. Synced to her business card. The drop-off pin was 2 blocks from our house. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Harris had gone further. He'd requested a data dump from iCloud backups, legally, through public image links Grace had posted and then deleted. Live photos. He explained how those photos often capture a few seconds of audio or video before the image. One stood out. February 13th, the night before. Grace had sent me a picture of a book and a glass of wine. Self-care night, she said. But the live version caught a snippet of reflection behind her, barely visible. But Harris enhanced it. In the mirror was Eric, shirtless, blurred but unmistakable, his hand brushing her hair. The angle had been cropped when she sent it. But the original told the real story. There were text logs too. Grace and Eric had been using a secondary messaging app, one she'd downloaded under the pretense of team collaboration. But Harris had retrieved backups from her cloud account. Conversations going back months. Flirtations disguised as work chatter. Code names. Inside jokes. Coordinated late-night meetings labeled as postmortems. "I need that room again," she wrote. "You've got it. Already booked," he replied. "Same jacket. If you'll wear that blouse again." Every message had a timestamp. Every timestamp matched her calendar blocks. One of the most damning? A *T she'd sent of our shared home schedule. School pickup times. My travel dates. She was building her affair around my absence with military precision. I remember sitting in the car outside Harris's office, gripping my phone, trying to breathe through it all. I wasn't angry. Not then. I wasn't crying either. I was just still. Like my body had gone into lockdown. Like if I moved, I'd shatter. It wasn't just about S*X. It was about int*Macy. Planning. Deliberate choices. She hadn't tripped and fallen into an affair. She'd built one. Back home, I printed everything. Not to confront her. Not yet. But to store it. I bought a fireproof safe and filed every document, photo, and receipt in order. A timeline. A story. One she would one day be forced to read from beginning to end. I made backup drives. One for me, one for Harris, one for my attorney. Because now I had the one thing I hadn't had before. Proof. Not suspicion. Not guesswork. Not gut feelings. Cold, indisputable evidence. Location logs, chat histories, door camera footage, receipts, photos. It was all there. A full profile of betrayal. That night, Grace came home late again. Claimed she'd been mentoring a junior associate who was struggling. "He's going through a breakup," she said. I didn't want to leave him hanging. I nodded. She made herself tea. Sat next to me on the couch like nothing was wrong. Her phone buzzed and she flipped it over. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She didn't smile. Didn't blush. She just sat in silence, watching a baking show and pretending to be tired. And I realized something in that moment. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. She didn't think she could be caught. She thought I was still in the dark. Still naive, still buying the lies. She thought she was winning. But I wasn't in the dark anymore. I was in the planning phase. Once I had the proof, something inside me settled. Not in a peaceful way. Not in a closure way. But in that cold, mechanical way you feel when you've confirmed the worst and there's nothing left to guess. Grace had made her choices. She had rewritten the story of our marriage without asking for a co-author. Now I was rewriting the ending. My first step was Tyler Reed. Tyler and I had gone to college together. He'd become one of the sharpest family attorneys in Mecklenburg County. We weren't close friends, more like former dorm neighbors who still exchanged the occasional "hope all's well" email. But I knew his reputation. Calm, precise, ruthless when needed. I booked a consultation under my middle name just in case. Tyler didn't even blink when I laid the evidence in front of him. He just tapped a pen against his legal pad and asked, "Do you want leverage, or do you want justice?" "Both," I said. In that order. We reviewed the prenup. Grace and I had signed it before our wedding, mostly at her father's insistence. He had assets to protect back then, and she wanted to look responsible. Ironically, the clause that stood out the most now was the infidelity clause. Clear, enforceable, triggered by proof of extramarital behavior, digital, physical, or financial. Tyler reviewed the evidence twice, underlining key phrases and timestamps. "She's out of options," he said. "If she fights this, she'll lose everything. If she doesn't, she walks with personal items only." "Good," I said. "I want the house. I want the kids. And I want her to know she didn't get away with it." He nodded. "Then let's do this quietly, but surgically." Over the next week, I shifted into a mode I didn't know I had, one part project manager, one part field surgeon. My face stayed neutral. My voice stayed calm. Grace never suspected a thing. 1. Finances. The first move was to secure our income streams. I redirected my direct deposits into a new personal checking account. Tyler's financial advisor helped me freeze our discretionary credit cards. Anything she might use for business expenses that weren't really business. I left the essentials active: mortgage, utilities, groceries, but restricted the rest. Tyler said the goal wasn't to cut her off, just to prevent financial bleeding before the paperwork hit her desk. Then I made sure to pull all joint account records. Every suspicious purchase, every Uber ride, every boutique hotel charge. I tagged them, itemized them, highlighted her spending habits like I was prepping for a board presentation. It wasn't about money. It was about control. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was building something. 2. The house. The house had always been mine legally. My name on the mortgage, my premarital down payment. Grace had moved in after we got married. The prenup protected my ownership, but Tyler advised I make the exclusive use request anyway. "Get ahead of her narrative," he said. "File early. Be first." So I drafted the motion. Quietly. In the meantime, I changed all digital locks. Grace never noticed. I updated the door codes, then programmed her old entry code to trigger a silent alert to my phone. If she ever came in unannounced during the process, I'd know. I also installed a private security cam inside the home office, subtle, tucked behind a photo frame, just in case she came looking for evidence of what I knew. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted documentation. 3. The kids. We have 2: Eli, age 9, and Nora, 6. Too young to understand what was happening, but not too young to feel it. They'd picked up on the tension already. Eli had started asking why Mom worked at night so much. Nora asked if Grace lived at work now. I told their school counselor the basics, that changes might be coming at home, and that I'd like to be notified if either kid started showing behavioral shifts. I asked for confidentiality. They agreed. I also quietly updated emergency contact forms. I listed myself as the primary. If anything went south, I didn't want to waste time in red tape. 4. The evidence. I made 4 copies of everything. 1 for Tyler. 1 in the fireproof safe. 1 on a USB drive stored at my brother's house across town. And 1 in cloud storage under a new encrypted email address I created specifically for the divorce. I labeled every file with a timeline. Rivorton check-in. JPEG. Eric text week 5. PNG. Uber_2-18. CSV. Every item had its place, its story, its date. Grace had erased our message threads on her side. I hadn't. I exported every conversation, even the ones that seemed mundane. Especially those. A prosecutor once told me that liars bury the truth in routine. The cover stories were always the most rehearsed. 5. Public image. Grace had carefully crafted a persona online. Part workaholic, part wine mom influencer, part hustle queen. But now that I knew the truth, I started watching how she presented herself. She posted a picture that week. Her at a coffee shop, captioned, "Chasing goals, building dreams, staying focused." Funny. The timestamp was 3 hours after she checked out of Rivorton Lofts with Eric. Tyler warned me, "She'll try to control the narrative. Affairs aren't just emotional, they're strategic." So I began building a preemptive wall. I met with close friends. Not many, just 2 couples we trusted. I told them the basics. That I discovered evidence of an affair, that I wasn't reacting in anger, and that I was preparing to take legal action. I didn't ask them to pick sides. I just asked them to remember the truth when the spin began. One of them, our neighbor Jonah, looked down and quietly said, "Noah, I had a feeling." I nodded. I wasn't mad at him for not saying something earlier. I understood now how easy it was to ignore what you didn't want to disrupt. Grace was charming, controlled, convincing, but not anymore. 6. The final preparation. Tyler and I drafted the divorce papers. We scheduled a formal delivery date 2 weeks out. Enough time to finish securing every piece of the puzzle. When it arrived, it would include the infidelity clause invocation, the financial breakdown, the custody recommendation, the motion for exclusive use of the house, and full evidentiary support. We were going for a no-contest default judgment. Give her one chance to walk quietly. That was the plan. One night, I stood in the living room, alone, looking at the framed photo of us from our 10-year anniversary trip to Asheville. Grace was laughing in the picture, wine in hand, hair in the wind. I remembered that trip. I remembered thinking, I got so lucky with her. And now I just looked at the frame and saw a stranger. She was still laughing in that photo, but I couldn't hear the sound anymore. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt ready. I used to think infidelity stayed between 2 people. You know, behind closed doors, whispered lies, bruised trust. But once the evidence came into focus, I realized how naive that was. Grace's affair didn't stay confined to the 4 walls of our marriage. It bled into everything, our kids, our routines, our finances, and then, finally, into her job. The collapse didn't begin with a shout. It started with a compliance review. 2 days after Grace was served with the divorce papers, she came home visibly shaken. She didn't slam the door or throw a tantrum. She didn't cry. She just walked into the kitchen, dropped her purse on the floor, and stared at me. They're opening an internal audit, she said. Her voice was so thin I barely recognized it. I didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow like I didn't know exactly what she was talking about. She stared at me for another long second, like she was trying to read my face, and then turned away without another word. What she didn't know was that I wasn't the only one keeping tabs. Natalie, Eric's wife, had reached out to me a week earlier. I hadn't even known she existed until she messaged me on Facebook. One of those bland, polite intros you'd expect from a stranger. Hi, I think we should talk. I'm Eric's wife. We met for coffee in a neutral spot. Natalie wasn't the dramatic type. If anything, she seemed embarrassed to be involved at all. But the moment I slid a manila folder across the table with time-stamped photos and receipts, she exhaled like someone who'd been holding her breath for months. Turns out she had her own folder. Natalie showed me *TS. Confidential emails Grace had forwarded to Eric. Vendor contracts, budget drafts, internal projections. Things Grace wasn't authorized to share, especially not with a contractor she had direct oversight over. She disguised the file transfers through personal email chains, but Natalie had found traces of the attachments while backing up Eric's devices during tax season. Her hands were shaking as she showed me one email. Grace had written, "Just make sure this doesn't get traced. I'll wipe the chain after you download." Eric had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. That emoji would cost them both dearly. Natalie had already spoken to her own lawyer. She wasn't just filing for divorce. She was preparing a whistleblower disclosure. She said she didn't care about revenge. She just wanted her kids protected. And the best way to do that, she told me, was to make sure Eric's ties to Grace were professionally toxic. So when Grace told me about the audit, I knew exactly what had triggered it. Natalie had already submitted the first batch of documents. Within 48 hours, Grace was placed on administrative leave. No laptop, no email access, a mandatory HR interview and instructions not to contact any vendors. That included Eric. But of course she did anyway. She didn't know I'd mirrored her iCloud messages. The syncing feature had remained connected to our old family iPad. She must have forgotten. Or maybe she thought I wasn't tech-savvy enough to check. Either way, her messages were still pouring in. One night, I sat on the back porch, scrolling through her texts to Eric while she paced upstairs. She was unraveling in real time. "Grace, they pulled my badge. I need to know what you said." "Eric, I didn't say anything. HR's being paranoid." "Grace, did Natalie do this?" "Eric, I don't know. Just don't talk to anyone." "Grace, if I go down for this, I swear to God." "Eric, you won't. Trust me." But she did. The review escalated faster than I expected. Grace's department had recently finalized a 6-figure vendor contract. Guess who the vendor was? Eric's consulting firm. And guess who had reviewed and approved the budget line item? Grace. It was a textbook conflict of interest, and she had left a digital trail so clear even her allies in the office couldn't defend it. Every Slack message, every email, every late-night document edit session logged from her home IP address. It all pointed to the same thing: undisclosed personal involvement with a contractor under her supervision. I didn't even have to lift a finger, but I did quietly. Tyler advised me to remain completely silent. Let her dig the hole. The deeper she goes, the less likely she is to recover legally or financially. So I just watched. And Grace? She tried to spin it. She told her friends she was the victim of workplace **ism, that she was being targeted because of her rapid rise in the company. She posted vague, defiant quotes on Instagram. Strong women in *mid-8-week systems. Loyalty is everything. Betrayal starts with silence. One post had a black and white photo of her staring out a window with the caption, "When you know your worth, nothing shakes you." Except it was shaking her. Badly. Her social circle started shrinking. At first, she got the usual comments. "You've got this. They're scared of your shine. Stay unapologetic." But the tone shifted fast. By the 3rd week of her suspension, her closest coworkers stopped replying publicly. Then they unfollowed her. One of them even reached out to me quietly. Off the record, they wrote. We always thought something was off with her and Eric. None of us knew she was routing budget approvals through personal channels. It's bad, Noah. Like, really bad. By the 4th week, Eric resigned. No public statement. No goodbye post. Just gone. HR kept things vague. Internal restructuring and contract consolidation. But the message was clear. They were cutting the rot before it spread. Grace got a formal letter of disciplinary action. The last message I read from her phone was one she sent to Eric the night he left. You promised this would stay quiet. He never replied. Back home, things got quiet, eerily so. Grace stopped pretending. No more cheerful dinners. No more team retreats or makeup-smudged Pilates runs. She stayed home, mostly in the guest room. I managed the kids, the schedules, the meals. She tried to keep up appearances at first, morning coffee, small talk with the neighbors. But word travels fast. The questions started coming. What's going on with work? Are you okay? Is Eric still around? She'd shrug, force a smile, and excuse herself. She stopped going to social events entirely. She canceled a speaking panel she'd been excited about for months. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. It was slow, surgical, like the life she'd spent so long curating had been held together with fishing line, and someone had finally pulled it loose. One night, I found her standing in the garage, staring at the boxes labeled "Donate" from our spring clean-out. She wasn't crying. She just looked lost. She turned to me and asked, "Do you think I'm going to lose everything?" And I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say she already had. But all I said was, "That's not my call anymore." Then I turned off the light and went inside. Her silence grew louder than the lies ever were. Friends vanished. Support dried up. And the freedom she once flaunted turned into isolation. Meanwhile, I filled the silence with stability. School drop-offs, quiet dinners, calm nights. No more late returns or suspicious weekends. The chaos she brought home was gone. What remained was peace. The kids laughed again, and I finally exhaled. The court upheld the prenup. Grace left with her personal items and no claim to the house. I got custody, the home, and more than anything, clarity. Her company launched formal disciplinary proceedings. Eric was already gone. Grace's career unraveled with every uncovered policy breach. It all started with a smile she sent at dawn, and ended with her watching the life she built fall apart from the outside.